I'm starting the recording now so that if somebody misses it, they can get on. See here, still people coming in. So we're going to talk about what ERS is. We're going to talk about the important words and things to know about the environment rating scale, and talk about notes for clarification, and then a very in-depth look at all of them. Just as a reminder for those that have just logged on, please make sure you have the pre-test completed and sign in the chat box. That is the only way we will have attendance today. So make sure that you do that. Just to give a little bit of background about the environment rating scale. We've been doing this for years and years and years now, but they have updated to the 3rd edition. And what's in front of you is a spiral bound book, and it will say 3 on it. Today we're looking specifically at ITERS-3, and then we will have another training on the ITERS-3. But it is a resource that North Carolina is using, and this will be one of the ways that we will be able to continue to maintain our stars. Once that new QRS modernization is out in place, they were going to give you different pathways, but this will be one pathway. And I'm going to try to upload a poll real quick. I'm going to stop sharing for a moment. And then we're going to do a little poll. You should see something come up that says ERS 3rd edition. Let me go back. So hold on a minute. I don't want that poll. That's the end of the poll. Let's try this one. Yes. Okay. So before we get started, I want to do this little poll. It says, how are you currently feeling about the ERS 3rd edition? I know some of you may not have ever even looked at it. Some of you have looked at it or reviewed it. And I know some of the directors I'm working with, they're supposed to be sharing this with their staff and having them actually complete self-assessments, just to get them familiar with it, because it's going to take a while. A lot of the stuff in there, as far as the scoring and all that's very the same, but there are a lot of different terms, technology, and all of that stuff. So are you nervous? Are you frustrated, totally terrified, or ready to learn more about it? So click it and check it, and then we will see where everybody's at before we get started today. Can y'all see the poll in front of you? Maybe I need to relaunch it. Let me know with a thumbs up if you see it. Some people do, several, okay. If you don't see it, you can just put in the chat box how you're feeling. And it's nervous, frustrated, totally terrified, or ready to learn more. Nervous, frustrated, totally terrified, or ready to learn more. Okay, let's see if we can pull it back and well, that didn't really work, did it? I think most people are putting it in the chats. I don't know why it didn't come up. It's supposed to give me oh, I see it on this other one here. Okay. So nervous, frustrated, a few. Miss Brittany's joining us. And a lot of you are ready to learn more, so that's good. That's good to hear. We're going to end this. I'm not going to share results. We're just going to move forward and go on with it, okay? So back to sharing my screen here. Pull that up. There we go. So we know that the ERS, and we've been saying this for years and years and years, we want it to happen every day, not just every 3 years, so that your staff have to get newly prepared all over again. But for now, with this new one coming up and the way that things are set up, you'll see here as we go through today, there is a lot of new things and things that have been added. So this is our guiding principle for environment rating scale, to focus on what we know that is good for children, and that's what we want to focus on. So this one here talks about ERS every day. So this is just some things to know that are important to keep in mind when we are going through this today, okay? The ITERS-3 is used to assess classrooms for children who are birth to age 2. And I just had someone email me this morning as soon as I got here, and she's like, well, what if I have a 2-year-old classroom that has 2s and 3s? And what you do is just like before, you look at the age range, and if the majority of the children are 2, you would use the ITERS. If the majority of the children are 3, you would use the ECHRS, because the ECHRS-3 is for children 3 to 5 years of age, okay? So we want to make sure everybody does have the correct version of the scale. In the beginning, I showed you pictures of it. It's that 3rd edition with a spiral bounding. The others you can burn, trash, throw away. They're no longer in existence, so we don't have to worry about keeping those, okay?
Sherry,
Yes.
I was told that the ITERS-3 is for up to 36 years, and there wouldn't be any more of that splitting the 2-year-old group.
Um, well, let me go back to that, okay? It is up to that, but some of them are saying like of the majority of them are 3 years old, and that's when you'd have to look at it and move up to it. So if they're 36 months or older, it would be ECHRS.
Right. Yeah, but the 2-year-old class will now be assessed via the ITERS-3.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Let me exit out though. Sorry, went to the next one. Read through the scale. We're going to talk about that today and the terms and the different definitions. We're going to read through the items, paying very close attention to notes for clarification. These are updated a couple times a year. So I'm going to show you in the NCR Lab website where to find those. Before you start any assessment, self-assessment, anything like that, you're going to want to have those notes for clarification. And we want to consider the why behind these various requirements. Several years ago, when we were, it's probably been 3-4 years now, maybe longer than that, but we did a director's training just on the why behind each item. So we're going to be reviewing that and updating that, and we'll send that out to you guys once we get that done. But that's a way to share with your staff why these things are important. Going through every single item and talking about them. You can do it during a staff meeting. You can do it as a handout and just talk about a few at a time, however you see, fit to do that. Spending time reflecting on your current practices and environment and how it relates to the environment rating scale and these new examples that they have here. But we're going to go over all of them. There is no teacher interview with this new scale, so that's no longer there. All the scores are based off of that 3-hour observation only. So what they see in here, that's what they're going to score on. No interview. Time requirements for assessing furniture, play materials, gross motor, space, equipment, all of that are in the indicators now. So we're going to talk a lot about that as well. I'm going to take this CC off of my screen so that because it's move it out of my way. There we go. Um, there's no more substantial portion of the day for the ECHRs. When we go over that, we're going to be talking about what they're looking for there. And of course, we always want to use the NCR Lab website. That's what we're going through today and looking at. The other things we need to think about when we're looking at ECHRs, and we're not looking at it today, but we'll talk more about this when we do the ECHRs, but I do want you to know that at that minimal level of 3, usually they're talking about 25 minutes of material should be accessed. When you go to that good level of 5, they're looking for 1 hour during that 3-hour assessment where all your materials are accessible. So that's something to keep in mind. ITERS-3, in before we have much of the day. It's not wrote in ITERS-3 like that. They talk about different lapses, and we're going to talk about that during this training today. They do not want to see any long lapses in the level 3 and no long lapses with a few short lapses of 5. So that's going to make more sense in a minute. But a lapse is basically, a long lapse is more than 15 minutes and a short lapse is less than 15 minutes. And when they're talking about a lapse, they're looking at the accessibilities of materials. So when children are awake and not involved in routine care, the materials in the classroom should be available for the children to play with. That's considered a lapse. So if they're standing in line waiting to do something for too long, or a 2-year-old room has group time for too long, or they're in bouncy seats or in a bed too long and they're awake and ready to play, if they're in these restraints for more than 15 minutes with nothing to do, that's considered a long lapse. Okay, we'll get more into that as well. When children are in distress and they're required to stay in a group, this is also considered a lapse. When group time is not a lapse. So some children, when you're in group time, like one child might ask you to finish a story or read a different story. That's okay as long as the children are engaged to do that. So we will see in a lot of these items as well, in the ITERs and the ECHRs, that they will say observe once, observe twice, observe once for 2 different children, etc. So the language has changed in here. And we're going to talk a lot about interactions today. There's still a focus on materials and what materials you have in the classroom, but the majority of it is all about what the teacher is doing and saying with those materials, and even with the displays in the classroom that you have up. So right now you should have your infant and toddler environment rating scale, 3rd edition, in front of you. It says there's 33 items.
Carrie, that's my slide.
Oh, sorry.
I don't want to
I
be
just
rude, but I know you'll keep talking and talking and talking.
Yes, I will. Go right ahead, baby.
Yes, I will
get
interject.
sidetracked.
Yeah, I will interject when it's time for me to speak out
Yes,
if need be. So I'm not being rude. I'm just
Nope.
making myself available to the
Yes.
work. I do want to piggyback off one thing. If you go to your ITERS book on page 9, I just want to make sure that we are very clear. The way Sherry wrote it with the age breakdown, it was just showing that you will have some 2-year-olds all the way in that 0 to 3 group. But yes, Nancy, you are correct. As it reads on page 9, this scale is used for children birth, so that's 0 to 3 years. So you would do those into months, which would end up being 35, 36 months. Okay, that is the cutoff. So I just want to make sure that we are all on the same page with that. Now, ERS every day with the infant toddler environment rating scale, the 3rd edition. What we're looking at here is that within this scale, with the rating scale of the third edition, it has 33 items now, and they're organized into 6 subscales. So if you want to flip through your book, mark it, put a tab in it. I'm not sure what's going to work for you, but I will tell you with space and furnishings, the actual scale with the indicators and the items, all of that starts on page 17. Now remember, every page prior will be the notes for clarification for that particular item. So if you look at page 17, now somebody that has their book, tell me what page is the notes for clarification on regarding space and furnishing?
16.
Exactly. So that's what I mean is going to precede, the notes for clarification are going to precede that subscale that it is speaking on, unless you print the additional ones that come from NCR Lab. Personal care routine, you find that beginning on page 25. And I'm telling you this in case you want to tab it. Language and books, page 33.
Chunda, I'm gonna interject 1 minute here, okay?
Yeah.
If they look at their book, the very front of their ITERS book, some books, if you've recently or purchased them like in the past,
Oh, yeah.
it may have additional notes already in it. So these pages might be a little different than what Chunda's saying.
That's true.
It might just be 1 or 2 off because we noticed that when we did
They
it. So I
will
just wanted
be.
to throw that there.
Yeah, if you don't have, thank you. If you don't have the book that already has the revised notes within it, let me go check mine to make sure I'm saying the right thing. No, my book does not have the revised notes. It came with notes for clarification, but it's not revised. So if you do have a revised book, your pages might be a little off. That's exactly what she's saying. Very good point. So guess what? Just go to your contents within your book and it'll tell you exactly where those subscales begin if my numbers are off. But these are the 6 subscales that are found in the book: language in books, activities, interactions, and program structure. So yeah, I won't give page numbers in case there is a difference in the type of book that we're using. Okay, next slide. Here are some important words that you should know. So right around page 11, again, it might be a little off. I always say that, but just look for important words to know. And that's going to be, for me, in the book without the additional notes included, that begins on page 11. And it talks about explanation of terms used throughout the scale. So that's where you will find that. And basically how we're walking you through this is how you want to take your staff. You want to introduce vocabulary, the language, before you really get into the meat of what we're here to dissect. But accessible, we realize that, just like Sherry was saying, whatever is going on in the classroom, children need to be able to get at it. If they're non-mobile, then those items need to be brought to the position where they can reach and grasp for them. Appropriate. This is used in certain items to look at the age and developmentally suited, what is developmentally suited for children in the group. So if you need an example, I suggest that we go, I'll just tell you the indicator in case the page number is off. Go to number 4, display for children. And if you look at item number 4, display for children, and you look at indicator 3.2, see that word appropriate? Some and 3.3, those vocabulary are going to be intermingled throughout these scales. So for each tier, each section, there's vocabulary that's going to give you a clue as to what you're going to need to see. Hand washing, you can go to NCR Lab website. And when I meet with y'all individually, I'll show you this. I know that Sherry gave me the ability to share, but I don't want to get lost in the flipping of the screens. So when we meet, yeah, I'm a little nervous about that. I got to work on that. That's something we learned in our virtual training class on yesterday. I have to get a little more confident, but I don't want to lose the message for not being able to get back to the right screen. So I will work on that outside of this time. But if you were to go to NCR Lab and you go under resources, y'all should be well acquainted with that website by now. Under resources, I did print, and you can always pull up the information from the division's website. But if you go under the resources from NCR Lab, they've got a whole booklet on health practices. And I know it's going to be hard because I got that virtual screen. But I'll show you in person. There's a whole booklet. And with this booklet, there's a video that goes with that information. So therefore, you can test your ability to understand what it is that you're watching. But you can go to the division's website and pull up the hand washing rule. And of course, the ERSI website, ERSI, they also give you diapering and hand washing procedures. Lots of resources. So just remember with hand washing, it's not about them holding their hands and rubbing their hands under the water for 20 seconds. Once they soap and wet the hand, it's scrub, scrub, scrub away from the water for 20 minutes. Excuse me, 20 seconds. Okay? And then you have to look at the literature to understand when hand sanitizer is permissible. Okay? So like out on the playground, if someone soils their hand really bad and you can't take them in, yeah, you can use hand sanitizer. But when you go inside, of course, it's time to wash hands, right? Same thing. That hasn't changed. The word some, used to refer to the quantity or frequency. This is used at a minimal level of quality. Minimal is in the 3, 1, 2, or 3 categories. Those are the minimal levels. So if you were go to indicator, item number 4, indicator 5, I'm going to stick with the same one. Item number 4, display for children, indicator 5. You'll see some more vocabulary, many. Many is used in 5.1. Okay, frequency. They don't give us real percents. We just have to kind of visualize out of how many children are present, what would equal many. And then usually and generally, those terms are also scattered throughout the different strands of the scale. And like it says here, this is a term that is used to represent general practice observed, meaning about 75% of the time. So if you were to go through this scale and just look through it, you would see the words usually and generally interdispersed. You can look at item number 9 in your book, your ITERS book, because I like to give you examples of what I'm talking about. There's the word frequent in indicator 5.1. And it goes on and on. So you will be able to see the words of usually or generally, or it will be interchanged with frequent. Okay? And the word frequent appears in the 7-tier strand, which is, of course, excellent quality. So that's how you can understand the higher the tier from 1, 3 to 7, the more that is expected. Okay, Sherry, next slide. Sherry, next slide, please. Okay.
I'm sorry, hold on one second. I'm trying to get my screen to. Is it sharing again or not?
It stopped.
Okay,
We,
so
we
let's
see
try
each
it again.
other. Yeah, just put it back up there.
Okay, now here we go.
Okay.
All right.
All righty. In my book of the ITERS book, if you go to pages 11 through 13, as I mentioned earlier, it talks about those very important terms. That's at the beginning of the book. If you flip there, you'll see explanation of terms used throughout the scale. Some of these words are present. So if you want deeper meaning, deeper understanding, more explanation for these terms, you can go and look on those pages. So the first one, talking about engaged. Remember, just because a child seems to be interested and is paying attention, that's a good thing. They really are engaged. But if they're just quiet and well behaved, just present, but not really participating, remember, quiet and well behaved does not equate engaged. So that's what we were talking about, making sure there are other things happening, especially like when you do group time. And I'll skip down to the bottom. Within this, it's not required that it be observed, but it must be age appropriate if it is observed, and participation is not required for those that are not interested. So that goes back to engaged. So you've got to have in the classroom at least 2 alternative activities. And generally, it just means keeping those centers open, right? Don't shut down any centers and allow them to place themselves in a place of play where they will be engaged. Back to free play, it means that the child is permitted to select materials and companions as far as possible. They can manage their play independently, and that means indoor and outdoor. Okay? And again, if you were to go in the book and you would look up, it would say number 7, the play areas and the interest centers. They break that down into more detail as to what those things really mean. So you really do have to get a handle on the vocabulary of the terms that they're using to be able to articulate the scale as you're doing the observation. And again, free play does not start until the last child goes to the center. So remember that when everyone's figuring out where they want to go. It's not going to start when the first child hits a center. It begins on the clock through the observation once the last child has entered a center for free play. And it stops once the teacher calls for cleanup. So remind your teachers when they're in the classroom with their children to not stop free play prematurely. To know that when they set that timer and they say that the time is winding down, that's exactly what they mean, because inadvertently a teacher could short themselves a few moments or a few minutes if they don't watch that, okay? Because we've seen it happen in our practice through the reliability. No shade, it's just something to articulate and to understand what that language means. Then weather permitting, again, you can go to the division, you can go to NCR Lab, and you can pull up those weather charts so that you can fully understand how to set that outdoor play. When the weather changes, such as what we're experiencing now, that means you might have to set your outdoor time for play towards the end of the day when it's warmer, and vice versa. When it heats up, you might start that outdoor play earlier so that every class will get the allotted time that they need. Okay? Individualized teaching involves responding to variations in the abilities, needs, and interests of children in the group. Working with individual children in a systematic way that involves determining the child's ability to do a task or learn a concept. So at some point, you will, or as the teacher will, and you will guide them, they will need to know where each child is individually, meaning what variations, what more needs to be added into that child's daily play so that they can engage in the concepts that they need to learn to strengthen whatever domain that you're looking at. It could be health and physical development. You know, it might be something to do with coordination, but you as the teacher, them as the teacher, and you as the director will both need to work on that understanding. And you might need to guide your staff. Maybe they don't know how to break that down for individualized teaching. But it's really doable when you get into those center play times. You can really do individualized teaching then. Here we have a play area versus an interest area. Again, I would say go to page 13 and look for the in-depth explanation that our writers give us. But a play area is a space where play materials are provided. It's just where the materials are for them to use, right? But an interest center is clearly defined, meaning it's for a particular type of play. And materials are organized by type and stored so that they are accessible to children. But if you go to your book, they're going to give you, in the ITERS scale book, they will give you a deeper explanation if you should have more questions on that. Any questions so far with that data? Okay.
I have a question really quick. So, whenever you say about, of course, you know how they are allowed, they're supposed to have at least, I think, three. I can't remember exactly right offhand how many hours it's supposed to. They still have for free play. Excuse me. Let's say the kids come in. Let's say my center open at 6:30.
Let me stop you right there, honey.
Okay.
The spa thing is no longer an issue.
Okay.
That's what you're referring to, right? The
No,
hours in the day.
no. I'm referring to the free play. You know how you just said don't shut it down. So let's say they're in here right now assessing the classroom, and
Yeah.
they only allowed a certain amount of time. Like these centers are supposed to be open for 4 hours, 5 hours. If we
Okay.
shut it down before the 4 or 5 hours, that counts against us, correct?
Well, they're gonna observe you for 3 hours.
Okay.
So
Okay.
in those 3 hours is all, that's the time frame we're speaking about.
Okay, yes, ma'am. Never mind.
Because substantial portion of the day, what you're speaking on is correct. It is a thing, but they're not gauging it as that way any longer.
Okay.
They're just looking at the 3 hours of observation. And within those 3 hours, yes, there are incremental times where free play must be happening.
Okay.
And the book actually gives you a deeper explanation of that. But for our purposes, just engage with those centers open for the 3 hours of your observation. And then it's up to the teacher to make sure that they're allowing the appropriate minutes to the hours for that center play so that it can be counted. And I can show you one-on-one where that is in the book, because you know what? I don't see that chart right away. It's probably in the beginning.
Okay. I mean, I know, because I came out of a classroom with Eckers, and mine was 3 hours and 40 minutes. So I was just making sure because, let's say if they were to come in and they wouldn't come in as early as, drop off time as soon as we open. That's what I was worried about because that first hour we're all together in that one room. That consider free play. That's what I was just a little worried
Your
about.
free play is going to be considered as noted by the observer once that observation begins.
Okay, yes, ma'am.
So whatever you've done prior to them coming, that's great. That's good practice for the children. That's what we're supposed to be doing. But they're only going to measure you on what they see in those 3 hours. So that's where it all should be happening.
Okay,
Full
yes.
throttle.
Okay, thank you.
Does that help?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, good. I'm glad.
One thing to keep in mind too, when it talks about free play, we talked about those lapses, and that's where that's going to come into play, Regine. If they're, in restrictive equipment or something else is taken away from that free play at that highest level in free play, they want free play to happen indoors and outdoors throughout the observation. So they're only there for 3 hours. So we have, during our observations that we did, doing the practice assessments, some of them didn't get free play
For that hour.
for that 60 minutes, that 1 hour while we were there during the 3 hour observation. Some of them did not get that because they were busy doing other things.
They stopped it, they started it, they stopped it. That's what I meant earlier. They stopped it, they started it. That would be considered a lapse. And that makes it difficult for the teacher to keep up because they're not writing down, I stopped. We're writing it down because we're observing. But we're seeing they stopped free play at 9:10. They might have did free play at 8:30 and they stopped it at 9:10 because according to their schedule, it's time for group play or a group time, morning meeting, whatever you call it. So they might have only got 30 minutes of free play, but you're in the middle of the observation. You're the teacher performing the work. You're not thinking about that was only 30 minutes. You're like, oh, I did my free play. But what has happened is there's still 30 more minutes for a total of an hour of free play that must be observed within that 3 hour window of observation. So you're going to get more of that, hopefully, but you do need, right, Sherry? It does need to at least be that 1 hour.
Yes, to get to
throughout that 3 hour window that they're observing you. So keep that in mind.
Ms. Shonda, can we go ahead and just let them play that hour? Do we necessarily have to break it up?
Just check your daily schedule. You got to write that schedule to match what you want to happen. Absolutely, you can play for a whole hour. And just as long as the children are seemingly engaged, remember that too. And it's not like they're getting tired of what they're doing and now they're acting out or just messing with each other. But if that's how you want to do it, to secure that 1 hour observation is there, then that means your daily schedule needs to represent that. So you might have to tweak some of your times on your daily schedule. From what I've observed, most people do get that an hour of free play within a 3 hour period based on how their daily schedule is written, even with stopping for group time, even with having to say, everybody, let's take a water break. They still manage to get that hour's time in of observation of free play. But if it's easier, if it's going to be for the continuity, I would say most definitely help your staff and rewrite that daily schedule. So free play is definitely, say, from 9 to 10 or 8:30 to 9:30. It really just depends on when these assessors are going to enter into your classroom. For us, sometimes it was 8:30, sometimes it was 9 o'clock. It just depends on what their schedule is. Any other questions? Very good questions. Okay, Sherry, I'm ready. Next slide. So here we talk about interactions. And as you all, some of you know, you've joined us. You've joined us in the past regarding these interactions that we've talked about with you and your staff. And we talked about it in terms of how do we go about these positive interactions. So I'm going to digress a little bit and remind you the 3 steps to powerful interactions that we learned with some directors. We repeated this and repeated this. Remember, it was the first step is about connection. Excuse me, being present. If you're not present, how can you connect, which is the second? How can you know your staff? If you're not physically there ready to discuss whatever's on the agenda, then you're not going to be able to connect. Same thing for teachers. They've got to clear their mind, clear the static, and be ready for positive interactions. That's really what we're aiming for. But if they're not in the mindset to be ready to be present with their children, then their interactions are going to show exactly where their mind is, not present with the children. So here you can see these interactions, they can be negative, positive, or neutral. I know we were having issues sending out the materials, so when I see my team of people that I work with, I'll be sure to give you all of these handouts because they're very good handouts, and there's quite one in depth that I really like. Okay. And we can go over that together during our TA times, and we can talk about it. We can read it and we can see what it means in our own individual centers. But interactions, this is going to talk about the ways in which staff relate to children. I'm just going to read. Everything that I've already said is true, but this is what we've presented in writing. These interactions are verbal communication between staff and children, physical contact, or nonverbal communication. So gestures, how their attention is focused or not focused, facial expression. All of these things are ways that we interact just as humans. Interactions are usually classified as being negative, positive, or neutral. If you go to page 13 in your ITERS book, once again, it talks about those terms in item number 3. Interactions, negative, positive, or neutral. I would advise you to make notes there, highlight what you need, because there's a deeper explanation as to how this is broken down and how they describe this. This is a brief narrative here on this PowerPoint. So they're going to classify them throughout the scale, and it's going to pop up. It's going to come in the various strands of the scale. Was the interaction positive, negative, or neutral? And so it's up to the teacher to make sure that the positive interactions are happening at all times. Negative interactions, of course, will make the child feel unwelcomed. Think about how negative interactions make you feel with your peers. And I'll say no more. You know how that makes you feel. And as adults, we have a bigger vocabulary to categorize how those make us feel. Disrespected, angry, makes me feel like, me personally, like you're not interested in what I'm saying. So we do have to be mindful of all of this. You know, I have to be mindful of my facial expressions. Just because I'm focused doesn't mean I'm angry. It just means I'm listening. So maybe I'll need to smile a little more while I'm listening. Okay? But overall, we don't want any child feeling devalued, incompetent, unappreciated, or unloved. That's exactly what negative or even neutral interactions could render. But I encourage you to go into your book and read for a deeper explanation of these terms. Okay, and then there it is, what I've said. The negative interactions carry those messages that I've already mentioned. Positive interactions, they make us feel welcomed. They make us feel received, that you're interested in what is being said by the person. We're not as on guard as we would be with the negative or neutral reaction. So we're more open to hearing what is being said. A positive interaction will display respect and interest for the person who is speaking or engaging with you at the time. And again, neutral, this interaction does not give strong messages of any type. It's that negative affect. If you were to use the class tool, that is one of those terms. It is just not a good look, and we do not want to be perceived as that, because that follows throughout the scale on many of the indicators and the items. And ignoring a child, that's not even on here, because that's just no tolerance. You ignore a child and it's really obvious that the child is being ignored, meaning the teacher is ignoring the child, that's definitely going to hit you hard through your rating, throughout the scale. Any questions there? Okay, Sherry, take it away.
Okay. So in the ITERS-3, you will also see that there are different age ranges. So I listed them here just because in the different indicators that you'll read, sometimes it will refer to young infants, young toddlers, older toddlers, this, that, and the other. So it's important to know what age group they're referring to, okay? So we know infants are birthed to 11 months of age, according to the ITERS-3, but young infants are birthed to 5 months of age. These are children who cannot sit unsupported, okay? When they look at older infants, these are infants who can sit unsupported, and they're looking at age ranges from 6 months to 11 months. Toddlers is 12 to 23 months. But when you see the word young toddlers, they're looking at 12 to 17 months. Older toddlers, 18 to 23. And then for a 2-year-old room, it's 24 to 35 months. Younger twos are 24 to 29, and then older twos are 30 to 35 months. So the reason that this is important to look at when you're going through the scales, you may have a toddler room, say, but all the children are under 18 months of age in that toddler room. So some of these items or the indicators could be scored NA because you don't have any children in that toddler room that are over 18 months of age. Or in an infant room, you may not have some children or all children may be 11 months or younger. So just you got to be very careful with these age ranges and looking at those different age ranges. We've already said this, the age range for ECHRS is 3 to 5. And the nuts and bolts of this instrument, they're the same format through ITERS, ECHRS, and either the family tracker homes. They have the subscale, they have the item number, and then all the indicators that we'll be looking at when we talk about scoring in just a minute. As Chanda said, we're focusing a lot about interactions because this is what's heavily focused on in the environment rating scale, the ITERS and the ECHRS as well. But it's intention, learning experiences created during play, transition, and routines. So if you've got your hand out, I want you to highlight, underline, circle, whatever you can do. A lot of the 5 and 7 items, it's going to talk about they want to see it during free play, during transitions, and during routines. So interactions is heavily focused on. We can't say that enough. You want to consider children's observed access and observed lapses in the materials and the toys throughout that observation. A thing to think about, and Chanda mentioned it a little bit earlier, you can put on the schedule that you have 1 hour free play from whatever time to whatever time. But then those other 2 hours that they're there for that 7 level, they want to see it happening throughout the observation. So you want to make sure that there's free play during play, transition, and routines, okay? There's no indicator in here with children with disabilities. It's really put out throughout the whole scale, and you'll see that when you start going through these and doing self-assessments. Emphasis is on variety and having enough materials for the children that are allowed in that classroom. So if you can have up to 12 toddlers, then you should have enough for 12 materials in each different activity area in that classroom. We want to make sure, because everything's just based on that 3-hour observation, that these materials are available and accessible. I'm looking at my notes here. So like during free play, teachers typically already go around moving from center to center, talking about free play, what they're doing in the dramatic play, or what we're cooking today for supper or breakfast or whatever. Transitions, you can even talk about things and sing and keep the interactions going during, nursery rhymes or using a puppet or finger plays and things like that. And routines, while you're eating, they still want to see interactions. You can talk about the food that's on the plate, what it tastes like, what color it is, changing a diaper, talking about changing that diaper, the experiences they're feeling. Oh, that wipe was cold, wasn't it? That type of thing. So it's got to happen all throughout the day.
Sure, quick question.
Yes.
I know you said the number of materials. So say my classroom, the ratio is 1 to 8. So what if I only have 5 children in there, I still need to have them 8 toys. It's not the number of kids, it's the ratio number of how many you can hold in the classroom.
Yes, that has been my understanding. Yes, ma'am. That's what they will look at.
Okay.
One thing about interactions, they talk about 2 different terms here, interactive play and then active engagement. So once again, they're looking at the type of play that involves you and the child or between child and child. It can be cooperative, it can be games that are competitive, it can be physical games, it can be just activities playing in the room itself. But when they talk about interactions, this is talking about building those relationships. If you don't have that very firm foundation of building relationships with those children, it's going to be really hard to interact with those children. Active engagement is defined at the time spent participating in an activity, whether it's child to child, teacher to child, but looking and using those materials in a developmentally appropriate way. This one talks about spaces and furnishings that support children.
Honey,
So
that's
it's your turn, ain't it,
yeah.
Shana? Yeah.
You kind of tricked me. You added some slides. I didn't have those pages. But I'm keeping up. I'm keeping up. So, spaces and furnishings that support children. Okay, that's a subscale. Remember, we were always talking about the subscales that we find in our book. So if you go to item number 1, we asked y'all to bring your books, and so we're going to use these books. So if you look at the first subscale, which is item number 1, space and furnishings, let me get there. It talks about indoor space, right? Focus on how the room arrangement enhances interactions and the experience of the children. Furnishings are child size and support emergent self-help skills. Special function furnishings that support children's play are accessible. And those are just extra items that you would add into the environment to enhance that play experience for whatever center we're talking about. So if you look at item number 1, indicator number 5, I was just wanted to highlight where it talks about ample. The word ample, that's another one of those words that you have to pay attention to the vocabulary, what that means. And it's actually, Brittany, this will help answer your question further in a contextualized sense. And Sherry did answer correctly. But in the 5 strand of the good on the scale 1 through 7, the ample indicator, that represents the highest number allowed. So yes, if you want to score higher, and if you only have 5 children enrolled, but the space can allow for 8, that is how you would get ample, by ensuring that you had enough materials for the highest number that is allowed in the classroom, regardless of how many are present or on roll. So I do like to give a live example of how the vocabulary represents itself in the scale. Again, I would say that's where we really have to pay close attention to our notes for clarification, because it tells us what these phrases or these words mean. Ample indoor space, enough indoor space, poor repair. All of these things come up through the strand, either items 1 through 7. That vocabulary is going to be there. So to get better understanding of what their definition is, because we do have to put our mind inside of their way of thinking based on the terms used and how they're defined. So I cannot stress that enough. Next slide, please. Responsive interactions throughout the day. Responsive. What does the word responsive mean to you? When you hear the word responsive, what does that make you think or feel? Somebody share out.
A sensitive interaction or action of a teacher or caregiver.
Exactly. Everything that we've learned, those of us that have been present for our 3 steps to powerful interactions, this material, it all relates. It's just a matter of how you want to share it out. But like I said, for those that had attended the previous Director Institutes where we talked about the conversations with the 3 steps of the powerful interactions, well, the first of the 3 is to be present. So just as Nancy explained it, you've got to be present to give those positive, responsive, nurturing interactions throughout the day. And of course, we're talking about the teachers. I know I keep saying y'all, but you are the teacher now until you share this out with your staff. So in order to be responsive, like I keep saying, we have to be present. We must work on encouraging positive interactions. All this can be defined as being responsive. So thank you, Nancy, for sharing that definition, as I very much agree with that. And as it says here, adult and child interactions, peer interactions between children and between adults, all of these interactions need to be responsive throughout the day. Warm and responsive interactions, these relationships are the starting point for learning. If we can't connect, if you can't feel like I care about what's going on with you and what concerns you, how am I going to be able to share the message of even today of what we're speaking on? Positive, responsive interactions. Next slide, please. So somewhere around page 57, if you want to turn to your book, I'm going to math number, item number 21. Okay? Experiences with math and numbers. Again, make sure that you focus on your notes for clarification to get a better understanding of the vocabulary and what they're looking for. until you can get those all about books. The All About Itters and Eckers third edition books, they really do go very much in detail to give better answers to what we can't see. They give pictures with those written explanations. So let me start with the Itters. The ITERS-3 includes one math and one number item. That's right here, item number 21, okay? But in that item number, it tells you how many times a math activity needs to be observed. Even at the minimal level, they want to see some math activity. Are you pointing out and speaking on whatever's in the classroom? It could be a picture of shapes, of numbers, of colors. It could be a song that you're learning for the week because you're in community helpers theme, or you're learning about community helpers, firemen. You may have a song that you wish to share out with your classroom as a teacher, maybe while you wait for lunch, something in between those transitional times. But if you look for the ITER scale, there's many observations from strand indicator, strand 3 all the way to number 7. And I'm strands, I mean, you know, the scales of where they grade us, 1 through 7. They're looking for opportunities where you're engaging, yes, the very young in a conceptualized math concept. Now, if you have your Eckers book, if you did bring that, if not, it's okay. Just make a note. For me, I would go to page 61. This is something that I thought would be good to do to kind of really highlight what we're saying. But for the Eckers third edition, for me, it starts on page 61 with the math activities. And so here it says it includes 3 math number items. So they've expanded that. And what are they? Item 23, math materials and activities. Item 24, math in daily events. And item number 25, understanding written numbers. Each of those items and all of those indicators starting at number 3 are looking for examples. So focus on the interactions that happen when children use math and number materials, or when the teacher can illustrate, let's use these math and number materials. It could be during a group meeting. It could be during center play. It could be during a transitional time. Okay. So you want to make sure that you get enough of those math and number concepts interwoven within those daily activities and routines that are happening in the classroom. Any questions? Okay, next slide. It should be experiences with language and print. Thank you. Again, I'll show you where that is found in your books. In the ITERs, it's going to be items 9 through 14. For me, that begins on page 33. I'm sorry, that was my Eckers book. I'm going to get my ITERs book. I said, oh no, I did that wrong. All righty. ITERs, page 33. You have item number 9. So the subscale is language and books. Item number 9, talking with children. Item number 10, encouraging vocabulary development. You see how this is expanding? Item number 11, responding to children's communication. Item 12, encouraging children to communicate. Item 13, staff use books with children. And item 14, encouraging children's use of books. More items related to language. If you have your Eckers book, it's going to be items 12 through 16, beginning on page 39 for me. Subscale is language and literacy. Number 12, helping children expand vocabulary. Number 13, encouraging children to use language. Number 14, staff use books with children. Number 15, encouraging children use of books. And number 16, becoming familiar with print. These items that are specifically considered on how teachers and children interact with print. Items that specifically consider how teachers and children experience books. And then a more robust reflection of language and literacy as the learning opportunities are there for all ages. So they've greatly expanded that. Again, paying attention to your notes for clarification, highlighting through each indicator and item number where they want to see the observations. One time here in the strand of 3, 2 times in the strand of 5, etc. You really want to highlight where they ask or where they state that something must be observed. Because the more I got familiar with where these opportunities needed to be actually seen, it was easier for me to actually see them happening in the natural environment. It may be easy for some to juxtapose between what they see, what they read, and what's actually going on. For me, I had to separate it. I had to highlight it in the book, understand the language, know where it is found, make notes on my score sheet so that I would be aware. Y'all saw all the notes that I had on the score sheets that I submitted to show you when we did the reliability testing. That was to remind me, because I can't flip forever through the book. I've got to know what I'm seeing as it relates to the book so that I can get the information down the way I need to and be fair and be equitable about what I'm actually seeing. Are there any questions there before we go to the next slide? Okay, Sherry, it's on you.
Myself off mute. We have been sitting for a while, so we're going to take a 5-minute break just to get up, walk around, go to the bathroom, refill your coffee, whatever you need to do. So we'll be back here at 10:50. Just get up and take a stretch. Okay, we're going to get started back, guys. And we're at the point where we're going to talk about scoring. We're going to just go through a couple examples. If you need more help on scoring, just reach out to Chunda and I. And when we meet, we will talk about that more in depth with you, okay? But we want to turn to item number 1. Let's just look at item number 1. On my book, it's on page 17. So it's indoor space, number 1. And of course, you can see under the column number 1, that is inadequate. If we can get out of that column number 1, that's our goal, because children may be at risk when you're looking at item number 1 or under number 1 and the different indicators. When you go to that 3 level, that's basic health and safety. We at least want it to be there. Our goal, though, is to go under number 5. Level number 5 is what they call good, which is developmentally appropriate. And for some items, we can go all the way up to a 6 or a 7. Okay, so that's excellent. That's enhanced developmental care. You're going above and beyond what the state requires when you're looking at that 7, that excellent level. Okay, so in scoring, you want to keep in mind those NAs, the not applicable. So it does not count when scoring your item when you have an NA. And we're going to go through that. We're going to show you for notes for clarification at the end to make sure you know how to get those notes for clarification as well. See if I go to the next one. Okay, so this is just an example. And when I very first started this, many moons ago, the way that I understood it best in my head is to say, is this true? So we're always going to start at the 1 level, that inadequate level, and start asking ourselves for number 1. So we're just going to read number 1. And I'm not going to read all these to you. I'm just going to go through this one just to make sure you understand. Not enough space to provide adequate care for the highest number of children allowed to attend at one time. So is this true? Yes or no? And that's what you're going to mark on the score sheet. If you look in the back of your book, there's a score sheet. We're going to give you a toolkit, and the toolkit will have a score sheet on it too. But that's where you're going to check. Hopefully we want everything under 1 to be no's. We want it to say, no, that is not true. No, that is not true. No, that is not. All the way through item 1 through 1 through 4. Okay. So say we've read item number 1, the indicator all under number 1, and they're all no's. Then we're going to go to the 3rd one, which is minimal. Once again, we're going to ask, is this true? Is there enough space for children, adults, and furnishings? Hopefully, the answer would be yes. So say we go through all the items under that minimal level, and they all have a yes, okay? Then we're going to go to good, okay? The good level, 5. We're going to go on these and start reading them. Is this true? And so there's a 5.1 and a 5.2. And so we say yes for 5.1, but 5.2 is a no, because we cannot control ventilation. The windows don't open. Our heating and air is not located in our classroom. We have no way to control that type of stuff. So if that's the case, all of number 1 is no, all of 3 is yes, and half of 5 is yes. What would your score be? You can come off mute or you can put it in the chat. I'll pull up my chat so hopefully I can see it. Whoop, hold on a minute. Somebody's put something in. Nancy Newcomb, yes, you are right. It would be 4. Now, if we had all of no's under number 1, all yeses under 3, and all yeses under 5, it could be 5 points. But since only half of 5 is there, we have to bump back to that 4. Okay? That's kind of how the scoring goes. These instructions are on page 9 of your book, but I did one here. Let somebody else back in. They bounced out for a moment. So this just gives you basically a scale to look at. If you have anything under number 1, though, that scored a yes, your score is a number 1. We cannot move past number 1 unless those are all no's. That's what's important. So let's move to number 3 and practice one more time. Number 3, we're looking at room arrangement. And we say all of 1 are no's, which is what we want them to be. We're going to look at 3.1, 3.2, 3.3. All of those are yeses. But when we look at 3.4 is a yes as well. When we look at 3.5, we see that can be NA because right now we have no children with any disabilities in our classroom. Okay, so we got all yeses and 1 NA. We're moving on to the good level, number 5, under 5. And under the good level,
Well, it's cupcakes, juice, and some other snacks she had decided.
somebody's got their,
I just
let's see if I can mute them. There we go. So we're under number 5. All of those are yeses. 5.4 again, NA, because we don't have any children in the classroom with any disabilities. Okay. So what would that score be? I put anything in the chat? Lisa Chafin, 5. You're correct. Because remember, we don't include those NAs as a thing there. So good deal. We're moving on to the 7-point level. Let me give you one more example here. 7.1 is a no. 7.2 is a no. No, wait a minute. Hold on. Sorry. 7.1, 7.2 are a yes, but 7.3 is a no. 7.4 is a yes. What would that score be? 3s are all yeses, 5s all yeses. 7s are all yeses except for number 7.4. Correct, Nancy. That would be a 6 because to get a 7, all of those 7s have to be yeses in those totals. So if you are confused about this, you let Chunda and I know, and we'll go more in depth about this. But I did want to give everybody at least 1 or 2 examples of what it looks like. Went too fast there. We talked earlier about barriers to accessibility of the materials and playing with the materials. So I wanted to give that a little bit more in depth because lots of times we've seen this during our observation. Children will be left in boppies or even on the ground playing outside or either inside, like on a little mat or whatever. For those non-mobile infants, we still have to remember to bring those materials to them to let them hold the rattles or a book or to interact with those children that are non-mobile. We don't want to see anything where they're just sitting there with nothing to do, basically. Other barriers might be a high shelf. Say you're in a 2-year-old room and the shelf is high, they've got materials on top of that shelf, but the child has to come to you to ask you to get those materials off the shelf. That is not accessible. If it has a lid on it that a child cannot get off, that is not accessible. So you have to really be careful and make sure everything's accessible. We've been in classroom where one center is closed off, like they've actually had the word closed and a drape, put over that. That's limited in materials. So that's going to be kind of off for you for accessibility as well. If you have a 2-year-old and you have a group time is not required in the ITERS at all. And I recommend not having a group time for ITERS classrooms, simply because their attention span is so short anyway. But just say you hold one for 15 or 20 minutes and the children are not engaged. It's just like they're getting in trouble constantly. That's going to count against you for those long lapses. So the boppies you see are just left in a swing and nothing's brought out to that child outside. Those are called barriers for accessibility. We just talked about long routines. So if the children are awake, they need to be in doing something active with materials in need. So here we're going to start talking a little bit more in depth. Hold on a minute. Did I skip one? Maybe I did. Oh. Anyway, we're
You
going to
didn't
talk.
skip anything. You're good.
Okay. All righty. These are the items that we're going to go over today. Hopefully we can get through these. If not, we've got some dates coming up. We're going to finish these. So we're going to look at space and furnishings, room arrangement number 3, which is what we were just on. So look in more detail at room arrangement. You want to look at your room for supervision number 1. If it's an L-shaped room or if you got tall shelves that block supervision, saying you're over in the dramatic play, playing with a child or multiple children, and you can't see children at a glance, that's going to interfere with your supervision for number 3. And if you remember play area versus interest area, this is where this plays a part as well in number 3. And the way I try to put in my head, because it took me a while to get the difference between a play area and an interest area. Interest area is a true center. Like I think of an interest area would be number 1 for blocks. The only thing you're going to have in blocks is people, cars, and animals. And of course, blocks. I think of a book center as an interest area. But say for whatever reason, you allow your children to bring other items into the different interest areas that or what you think are interest areas, that's going to become a play area. So this is going to come into play in this throughout the scale here. But for the minimal level, children grow very rapidly at this period and they enter the classroom at one developmental level, but they change to another before they go to the next classroom. So you're going to want to make sure the materials in that classroom, if we have young 2s compared to older 2s, a younger 2 may be able to put a simple puzzle together, but those older 2s, that's those 34, 35-month-old ones, they may have a harder puzzle material to put together. So you want to think about those classroom equipment that's in there as well. The arrangement of your infant and toddler classroom affects how well you can see the staff or see and supervise the children. So you want to make sure that is, you can see them all at a glance, no matter where you're at in the room. Even thinking about diaper changing and things like that. You want at least 1 to 2 open play spaces separate from routines. You want a small cozy area in there. You want clean surfaces, easily clean surfaces in the classroom, because at this age, children are very, very messy when they play, when they eat, they mouth toys, all that kind of stuff. Routine Routine care areas are conveniently arranged. So hopefully you're able to access the cribs or cots or whatever that's in the room. Your supplies are at hand. Running water, that's misspelled. But you want at least another area in the classroom that is able for children with disabilities to access. If they can't come to that area, then that's something that you want to bring to them. When we're looking at number 3 for the 5 level, it says space for at least 2 infant play areas and 3 different interest centers. So they're very strict when it comes to that. It's what they're looking for. A play area is just a place to play with materials, but an interest center really has the stuff that they need in that area to play with. And everything's labeled. It's gathered together. It makes sense to have an interest center. Arrangement for play allows for supervision. At the 7 level, and as you see throughout the scale, even in the revised edition that we had before, from a 5 to a 7, everything is just enhanced. It's a little bit better. It's a little bit more frequent. It allows you to have more material, everything. So arrangement for allows you to see all the children at a glance at the 7 level, even while diapering or preparing food, or playing with just one child in the classroom. Play in quiet areas is rarely interrupted by active play. So that's something that the teacher has to enforce. If your book area is your quiet area, then you would not allow them to bring musical instruments over there to sing and dance, okay? Traffic patterns provide movement for all staff and children, and it does not interfere with activities. And there's a special cozy area protected from active play, accessible much of the day. Who can give me an example of what a cozy area looks like?
I can. I think, well, me personally, I think it's, of course, with pillows, the stuffed animals, and somewhere for them to just go and chill and relax.
And to have substantial amount of materials, you want, like you said, you need to have at least a couple of different soft materials over there, a mattress, a beanbag, something that's going to make it soft and cozy for that child or for that age classroom. If y'all have purchased the All About books, it's the thick All About ITERS and the thick All About ECHRS book. A lot of these different indicators, they have really, really good pictures that shows you what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. They're expensive, but they are worth having, especially when you have a new teacher in the classroom and they may not understand some of this stuff that we're going over. It's a really good visual tool to help you with a lot of these. So looking at this classroom here and just thinking about supervision, what do you see here that could possibly interfere with supervision?
The blind spots for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I was trying to get back to my slide. And I think that's, I mean, I see that. Of course, this little thing here in the middle. I don't know what this is, like a tree.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't see that. And then I'm
Yeah,
not even sure what's in the middle. I mean, I can't really tell. I always overthink things, but here in the middle, like kind of under the yellow drapes, like, can you tell maybe that right there could be an issue? Like I say, blind spots for me.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. I agree with you. If you're either on one side of the room or the other, you're not going to be able to see the other side of the room. So definitely supervision is going to be an issue here. I think with some of these things draped over this one thing over at the window, it might be their, cozy area or whatever, but then you have this book stuff and then you have this big cabinet. And like you said, this, I'm not sure what that is. Might be art easel, and then that's an apron, a painting apron, but there's definitely supervision issues here. So just thinking about how you're setting up your classroom and that you can visually see all the children at a glance. So Moving on to number 4. Infants, toddlers, and twos, they're great observers. So we want things in the classroom visible for them to look at, to talk about, things that are displayed, labels on shelves indicating where materials are to be stored, and signs naming the centers. They do not count as displays. So we want to make sure that's clear. And the staff must talk about the displays with the children. Staff talk about means that the staff use the content of the display to teach the children. So for this example here, this is just some free art I got off the internet. So if a teacher was talking about this during an observation, she could talk about the colors, the shapes, what's drawn on there. And then she could even extend that learning. If they said this looks like a tree or a flower, you know, do you have trees in your yard at home? Do you have flowers in the house, or do you have flowers outside? But they're wanting the staff to talk about, to teach the children for displays in this area. The staff might read or name the object shown, explain the content, and ask questions about what is displayed. So that's going to be pertinent for the display. And if you look on the number 4, 1.3, if that's not posted somewhere in the room for the teacher to remember to talk about displays, they will score a 1 here. Because 1.3 says staff do not talk to children about displayed materials during the observation. And we've seen that happen. So that's an easy one to forget about. And as it goes over into 3, 5, and 7, even at number 7, it says staff provide extended talk about displayed materials. So here they're really looking for in-depth conversations, but it just gets, more in-depth as it goes over.
And remember, the higher the indicator, they're going to want to see the teacher point and talk.
Mm-hmm.
That is also,
yes, that's at 5.4. If you look, staff point out and talk to children about displayed materials. They have to observe that once.
Hey, Miss Sherry.
Uh-huh.
Is it okay to have, I guess, what you'll call like cheat sheets around the classroom that
Yes.
shows the teachers like reminders?
Yes, it is. And we're working on those. We've had those for the revised edition. And when we did our ERS toolkit, I don't know, 10, 12 years ago, we're working on a virtual toolkit to send out to you guys. And one of the things in this toolkit will be what has to be observed during observation. So you would just cut this out, and this is one of your things that they have to put up in the observed area. And you can put this up in multiple places. It don't have to be necessarily art that they talked about.
Hey,
One of
thank
these,
you.
yes, you're welcome. But definitely cheat sheets up. That's perfect way to make sure that they get these in, because you don't want to score a 1 here when you can easily score 7. And I'm thinking, looking in here just to see if there's anything else. They want it to be meaningful. We've talked about interactions and being meaningful. So the other thing here, not everything has to be protected so that they don't tear it up, but at least some of the things, or most all of the displayed. On 3.4, it says protected from being torn, because we know how toddlers and twos are. So this gets into it a little bit more. When we talk about these displayed materials, number 1 you have to think about is they must be on the child's eye level. It can't be something way, way up high or before the adults look at stuff. So 1.3 we talked about. It can't be past that unless you talk about it. 3.1, 3 pieces of colorful pictures and or other things, materials displayed. The primary purpose for displaying these materials is that children can extend the children's learning, okay? Meaningful experiences that are of interest to them are displayed, where they can reach them and see them, and then even recall past experiences. Like if you've got pictures up of y'all planting a sunflower seed or whatever, You can talk about that. Do you remember when we did this? Blah, 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 blah. Displays are there to stimulate the current topic being explored. So those displays that you may have about snow, we don't want to see them in April, May, and June. You want to take those down and move those displays up to what you're talking about. That's, related to either the season, the theme, whatever you're talking about that time. It can be a big thing to, when you're talking about it, is to encourage vocabulary, because these children are learning all kinds of new words. When they see the artwork displayed, they realize that they're valued and respected by others. So you definitely want to have their stuff there. Under 3.3, if you look under the display for children number 4, 3.3 says some artwork displayed, but it also has an NA. And this is where you look at these notes for clarification. On the page before it, it says NA if all children are under 18 months of age. So if you've got an infant or a toddler classroom and all children are under 18 months, that 3.3 could be an NA. At the 5 level, change regularly, many color, simple pictures, posters, photographs throughout the room. So it gets here, this throughout the room is on multiple items through the ITERs and the ECHRs. So if you only have display materials on one little area in the room, then they're not going to count 5.1, because you want it throughout the room and you want to talk about it throughout the observation. We already talked about 5.4. That's what Chunda mentioned. They want to see you point out and talk about it. Observed one time. Level 7, photographs of the children, family, pets, displayed at the child's eye level. Mobiles and other colorful three-dimensional hanging objects are displayed. When you look at 7.2, they have to have 2 or more examples must be observed. So once again, you have to go back to those additional notes. It's not always in your materials that you're going to read on the page that, my page is 23 for display for children. So you need 2 and 3 dimensional displays as well as changed frequently. And everybody knows the difference between, or what a 3D artwork is. Somebody tell me the definition for 3D artwork. Anybody know?
Moves freely through space.
Say that again, I'm sorry.
It moves freely through space. It can't be
Yes.
two-dimensional.
Right. So it means it has to be up and out when you're looking at 3D artwork, okay?
That was one issue I had when I was in my classroom. I was always getting the wrong art, thinking it was 3D. That's why I did not answer.
Yep. Let's look. Okay, some examples, and we talked about family photos, artwork, calendar, pointing and discussing the calendar, even talking about and reminding children about the hand washing poster that's up there while they're washing the hand. That counts. Choice boards. We want to change it periodically. We talked about that. Staff must talk about displays during the 3-hour observation. So, health practices. We're moving to number 7. For this item, we're not looking at meals or snacks or diapering and toileting. We're looking at preventing or practicing preventive measures such as washing hands after handling pets, wiping noses, to educate children to have long life health practices. So we're talking about washing hands. Taking appropriate action when children are sick to minimize the spread of germs. So we have a handout that when we give you everything for the toolkit, everybody knows before you come in the classroom, you wash your hands. Sometimes people forget when you go outside and you re-enter the classroom, you need to wash your hands as well. Before and after water play or messy play. And messy play would be like wet materials, water, paints, things like that. You're going to need to wash your hands after that as well. After dealing with bodily fluids or skin contact with open sores, and after touching contaminated objects such as surfaces as trash cans and pets, if you allow them to touch or play with the pets in the classroom. I'm looking on my little notes here in the book. You know, we under the 5 level, when you're talking about good, once again, you're thinking, this next slide kind of shows a little bit about that. But it's making some efforts in the level 3. And we talked about as it gets higher, the things require more. Like at the level 3, 18 inches cots are okay. But for the 5 level, they want to see cots 13 inches apart. Talking about self-help skills. Much more is needed in level 5 than it is in level 3. So nap time should meet the children, show children how to wash hands, describing the steps, teaching them how to wipe their own nose and put on their jacket, and why this is important, and talk about the spreading of germs. So they have to observe in level 5 several different times on 5.5. I'm going to read it to you. Under number 7, 5.5 says some positive teaching interactions observed during health-related practices. And it gives examples. How to wash hands, wipe a nose, put on a jacket. Tell the children why the health care. They have to observe that 3 times in level 5. When you go over to 7, everything carried out with no lapses. So one thing they look for here that a lot of people got wrote up on is if blankets are touches in cubbies or on the cots and they're touching each other. So getting in here and really digging deep for those 5 and 7 levels is going to be important of what they're looking for. Safety practices is next. I'm getting it too fast. Supervision is key when it comes to safety practices. We want to keep the children safe. That's our number 1 thing. Looking at indoor and outdoor hazards on number 8 as well. Hazards carry a high risk of serious injury. So thinking about, do you have safety straps on your high chair? Just no way that the children can slide out or get out of those. Small rocks on the playground. Children at this age put everything in their mouth. Beans in the sensory bins. Children sleeping in bouncy seats shouldn't be happening. Are there any cords accessible? Heavy toys on low shelves that they can knock down and get hurt from. Outlets covered. Babies to sleep on their stomachs. We know that's a no-no. So just looking at all the hazards from something that could be very simple to very major. Climbing, choking, fall zones, tree roots, the loose tops on the markers, that could be a choking hazard. One thing we learned during this, or I learned anyway, and I'm sure they probably talked about it in China's group too, is bollards. Bollards are like barriers, and I can give an example at Tyro Learning Center because the playground is right beside of a parking lot. So say your playground is connected to your, or right in front of your parking lot. If there is not something stopping a car from running into that playground, then that's going to be counted off on here. Bollards are like those big, tall, yellow things or some type of stump in front of it that's going to stop a car. If your gates are unlocked, tripping hazards, protecting children is number 1 when it comes to safety practices. So we need to try to anticipate any potential problems and demonstrate and teach safe, healthy practices. And talk about the rules right before you go outside. Just a 1 to 2 minute thing. What do we do when we go down the slide? Do we slide with our feet first or whatever that might be? Looking on my little list here. Anything else that would be a hazard? Because some of them are on here. It says no more than 2 major safety hazards observed indoors and outdoors. So you have to look at these words carefully when you're at number 8. Simple explanations for why children cannot do unsafe actions. That's one of those observable items, so you have to observe that at least once. And of course, younger children, you may have to change your level of supervision as to opposed to a child that's 2, that's climbing on everything or trying to put everything, in their mouth or whatever. We have any questions so far about things we've talked about? I know we're going through this pretty quick, but we want to get as much as we can in for you guys. Okay.
Okay, Sherry, this is for me to talk about, if you don't mind.
Yes, ma'am.
All righty, language and books. Here it is. That's just the subscale, and you have items 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14. So remember, we talked about this earlier, how much more in depth they're looking at language and literacy. What are you doing to encourage children's learning? So I'm not going to go into detail. We can see in our book what each of these represents. I'm not sure if anyone or all got the handouts that were accompanying this information, such as we talked about earlier in dealing with powerful interactions. And then there was another handout that talked about why talking with children is important. So when I meet with the centers that I work with, I'll be sure to reiterate this message as we go over it one-on-one, because right now all I can really do is read it, and I want you guys to have it, to marinate over it, and then we discuss it so that you can really digest it. So you can go to the next slide. But why is it important to encourage children to communicate? Who would care to answer that? There is no wrong answer. You're early childhood educators, so give us one of your reasons why you think it's important that we teach children to communicate, or encourage them rather.
It's important for me because, like you just said, we are educators and we are here to help the children, of course, meet their milestones and, of course, help
Right.
them get to the next level.
Yeah, absolutely. Builds the vocabulary. Thanks, Lisa, in the chat box. Anybody else?
And it's important that they can express their own feelings and needs.
Yes. Yes, that expressive language.
Ask, to be able to ask for what they need and what they want.
Mm-hmm. Because when they can't do that, what have we learned, Nancy?
Well, when they can't do that, that's where some of the physical behaviors and the lack of, or
Exactly.
the impulsivity
Yes.
that we see.
Yes.
And
And
that,
not, sorry,
that
I won't cut you off.
the
Go ahead.
executive functioning, how, and so if you don't use those skills, your brain is
Yeah.
going to cut those little neurons off and you won't be able to use them.
Exactly. Those experiences. That's what I learned from day one before I got into any formal education, just dealing with the brain development.
Yeah.
Those experiences that are created in the classroom is what Nancy is mentioning. They in turn create the pathways in the brain. They open them up. As she said, the neurons, they expand, the pathways open up, so more knowledge is gained and retained. So we definitely want to have those interactions where we're teaching them, showing them, modeling the proper communication, giving them the words, but of course, doing it in a way that is going to be fun and engaging for the young child, so that they can reach their milestones, like Regine said. Without that, they won't reach their milestones. They will be limited. They will become more frustrated, as we have seen. And then, not to mention the children whose uh, mental development, mentally, their development has been compromised because of whatever has happened, during the mom's pregnancy. Maybe there was a complication, they were born prematurely. Things of that nature will also contribute to the written and expressive language acquisition. So, I'm just going to read a few things from the handout that we're going to share with you don't already have, and we're going to go over, but you've mentioned why it is important. But we know that language is there so that we can express our needs, desires, and our interests. And as young children, none of us knew how to do that, right? We didn't know how to express how we felt until we learned the vocabulary, until we learned there are words that can go with these feelings that I'm having. But then socially, emotionally, we also had to learn the best way to express it without, having a rant. And I'm speaking as an adult, without getting an attitude, as even young children can do. Anything that we do as an adult, it can happen for a young child if they don't have the necessary tools that are needed for that desire that they have to communicate with us. Talking and listening to children does lots of important things. Remember, it's about connecting, so it improves your bond with them, and it encourages you to listen to them, and they learn how to listen to you. That's how we build relationships. That's how we nurture and build self-esteem. And through all of that, we do it through play, right? Which is an integral part of children's learning. It teaches them how to interact with their environment, solves problems, learn new motor skills, and acquire language. But without that communication, the ability, the know-how, they're not able to advance into those other areas of their own social emotional development. So I'm not going to read this whole handout, but I did just want to mention that. And yes, it is important to teach children to communicate so they develop appropriate social skills. Thank you, Cradles. And Wahlberg says, yes, teach them to communicate with language instead of biting. Exactly. That's what Nancy was mentioning. You get into those compulsory types of reactions because they don't have the language to express their frustration. So what do? They bite. Y'all know exactly about that. Talking with children, item number 9. So here, if you were to look at the individual strands in the minimal, good, and excellent, the 3, the 5, the 7, okay, scoring, they're overall are looking for the warmth with your greeting to them, the child, the parents. They're looking for informal conversation. Just you enjoying being in the presence of young children and how those conversations flow, because you do enjoy that. And those can easily be done upon morning arrivals, meal times, depending on if they're younger, through diaper changing, those routine activities, and definitely outside. But what are we saying? Talking with children should be observed with children from the teacher back and forth throughout the entire observation, all the time. Okay? And then if you have your non-mobile infants, then that's where you have to make sure that the materials are being brought to the young child so that you have conversational pieces, even things that you can discuss with them. Books, a mirror because you see their reflection, they see their own reflection, various toys that help develop fine motor skills, all of the good things, the reason why we have those materials. So like I said earlier, at the level 3 strand, they just ask for moderate amount of talking throughout the observation. Sensitivity shown to the interests of children, to their engagement or mood, is still very much present. And staff talk in a playful way, like finger plays, songs, rhymes, chants. Now for this at the level 3, if you look at your book, indicator 3.4, it tells you they want to observe these interactions for 2 different children, not just 2 examples with the one child, but 2 different children. Level 5 speaks of frequent, pleasant talking with children throughout the observation during free play and routines. Most talking to children is informal and not part of the formal group time. So again, it's extending, it's building upon your desire, your pleasure in just speaking with young children, seeing what's on their mind in a constructive way as they move throughout the day. Staff talk to children is usually responsive to child's interest. So you're piggybacking off what concerns them. And a very good one is when Monday comes, what happened over the weekend, those types of conversations. And again, your mood and your level of engagement, your energy, all of that is being perceived through the observation. So remind staff. And then, of course, level 7 is at the excellent level. Most talk is personalized with frequent one-to-one communication with each child. So that's the teacher moving about the classroom, especially during center play, having conversations with each of her children, conversations that are relative to the child that she's speaking with. And it's definitely designed to be about whatever is on their mind, what interests them, and of course, what's actually happening within the classroom environment. Next slide, please. Encouraging vocabulary development. Remember, we said the language and literacy part was very much extended. So that's what we're moving into. That's item number 10. Again, you're dealing with the language through minimal, good, and excellent, of sometimes, frequently, and generally. Remember to look at your notes for clarification. Of course, sometimes is at the minimal level, so it's not with everyone. Frequently means throughout the day, of course, throughout the observation, it's happening. You're encouraging that vocabulary development. Meaning, and it tells us in indicator 5.1 that you're using specific names for people, places, and things, and actions as children experience them in routines and play throughout the observation. So it's a lot of narrative type conversation, but you don't want to make it such a monotone monologue that you don't give the child a chance to respond. And then, of course, at the 7 excellent level, the word generally occurs, which refers to about 75% of the time. Language learning is dependent on the adults who care for and teach children. This is the message that we're continuing to express. So during the observation, they need to hear meaningful words in context, and so do children. We say the observation, but all of these things have been deemed as important and necessary to further develop a child, to help them reach their developmental milestones. This enables them to learn new words and remind the teachers when they use a new word to not be shy about getting the definition of that word. We can't take it for granted that they know, even if you're talking about water and the different stages and phases that water can go through, from a liquid to a solid. What is a solid? What forms do solids appear in? And the vocabulary explained with the words that we choose to use. Yeah, the adult role in children's language learning is one of the most powerful and necessary gifts we can give children that we care for and educate. Encouraging vocabulary development is all about learning new words and their meanings. Talking about feelings, because if we don't talk about our feelings, if we don't give examples of the various types of feelings that we can experience at any given time, then how will they know how to express them when they're in those feelings? They'll only know how to express them in a very combative, frustrating type of way. So we want to talk about our feelings, people, places, things, pointing out new items that's within the classroom environment. Okay. And again, for level 3 staff, sometimes, as I said earlier, use specific names. And then it goes on to indicator 5.1, where I mentioned frequently, and then 7.1 generally. So it should increase the frequency and the in-depthness of these conversations should increase and expound to receive higher credit, to score higher, to show 5-star quality within your programs with the teaching staff as they deal with language and literacy. Staff must manage vocabulary depending on the child's age and development. And that's easy just by giving them the definition of whatever word they're using. Staff talk to children about classroom materials or other concrete experiences, and they point and name the toy as child is looking at it. Naming the food that they are eating. So remember, showing and telling, speaking, naming, and pointing. That's the name of the game. That's what they've shown us to make sure that we're getting that message across to young children for their further learning and engagement. Next slide. And like we said repeatedly, talking should be happening throughout the day, during routines, free play, transitions, meaningful conversations. And you know how to determine that. Of course, you're going to have conversation that's going to be directional, that's going to be giving, the directives of what needs to be done. We're getting ready to go into this center or this activity. We can't get away from those types of conversations. So don't feel shy about needing to do that. But overall, the conversations that you're having are about listening to the child's response and building and expanding. Making sure that we're giving them new descriptive words, the adjectives and adverbs that help to emphasize a certain vocabulary word that we've used. It adds meaning to words for people, places, and things. You're teaching them the components of speech. And that includes color, size, shape, height, depth. Just depends on what activity you're engaging them. If they're in the math and science center, the vocabulary will be a little different. Using specific words and less common. Okay, so we want to give them new vocabulary. So disappointed, anxious, delighted. Those are words that we don't normally use, but we can, so that we can help them understand that feeling of sadness could be some of disappointment. That nervousness in your stomach is what we call being anxious. And there's good anxious and there's not so good anxious. We just have to help them put it in the context of which we're speaking about the word. So you get the idea. Those are the adjectives and adverbs that we're speaking on. So bringing that out more, giving them new opportunities to hear and learn new words, encouraging vocabulary development. Item number 10, continuing on with level 5, they talk about the frequency of using specific names for people, places, and things, those nouns, etc. When you all open up with the new word, how often is that new word repeated with the definition? Remember, we all learn by rote, by repetition, over and over and over. And eventually they will remember and it will become of their database. Here in this level, they want to observe other topics being mentioned at least twice. But you can also talk about past and future experiences. So all those conversations matter. All the time frames matter. And staff should make it obvious about comparison and contrasting to help children understand words. So all of these things you can break apart in even a staff meeting to go even in depth when it comes to language and how in depth they're looking for everyone to go when they're working with young children. And of course, level 7 is the optimal point value that we seek. And this is the teacher using a wide variety of words, just a bunch, and being very descriptive, doing everything prior, giving the definition, explaining, showing how it's used in a real world situation, right? And they ask that that's observed 2 times. All of that is highlighted in each of those indicators. And then, of course, evidence that staff changed toys, materials, and display items to introduce new words and ideas to the children. That's indicator 7.3. That's working with your environment and refreshing it ever so often. So you have to remind the teacher to be intentional. You're fine, Sherry, you can switch it. You have to remind the teacher to be intentional about bringing out new materials with accompanying new words and vocabulary. It's a very intentional process here with language and communication. Item 11, responding to children's communication. And just like it reads here, I don't really have much to add. It's important within this indicator that staff are close to the children. So when you're speaking and you're responding directly to a question or a statement, because remind you, you're engaging them in conversation, extensive conversation. So to get the most optimal credit, they want to see you right there present, as if you would speak to your own peer. Not speaking from across the room, because of course that's going to make you raise your voice, and it could be distorted as you yelling. So you want to be close to the child when responding. Isn't that how we have conversations? We're close to one another for the most part. But definitely during this observation, that's how teachers want to engage with their conversations. Otherwise, it won't count. It won't be personable enough and it won't count. Staff need to respond to verbal and nonverbal cues. So not only are you listening for the language that is expressed, but you're listening for the nonverbal language, right? The shrieks, the possible escalations that could be developing in center play, the tone, the sound. This is how this communication with this indicator is measured. In this item, the observer must see that the staff actively provides satisfying responses to children who are upset. Prime example, you're getting ready to go outside. Most children have no problem putting on their jacket or their sweater or their hat, whatever, their shoes. But then you have some that struggle. And they might not come and ask you for help. So it's up to you to observe what is happening with each of these children. And then you can read their nonverbal cue as how they show you that they're becoming frustrated because they can't figure out how to turn that sleeve inside out to get the jacket on properly. Or definitely they need their shoes tied and they're not of age to really know how to do that. So you have to pay attention to that. Even if a child is not actively engaged in center play and you see them sitting off to themselves, the teacher needs to go over and see what's happening with that child, engage them in a conversation. Remember that responsive caregiving is going to show the child that the teacher is concerned about what is concerning the child and that the teacher is going to do everything they can to solve that child's concern, to turn that frown or that upsetness into something of a positive response for that child as you positively respond. And so the environment needs to be, of course, relaxing and encouraging. Saying words that the child is trying to or is not yet able to communicate is also a very good idea. You're adding words and or ideas into their limited expression, physical verbal expression, or their nonverbal expression. You're adding the vocabulary and you're asking them, are you feeling frustrated? Are you a little unhappy? Are you sad? Are you angry? Whatever you think it may be, you use those words and give them the opportunity to respond and communicate back to you what is the proper word. Yes, I am feeling a little frustrated because you've explained to them what that word means. Well, why are you feeling frustrated? What's going on with you? Now, you know they're struggling to put their jacket on. But again, it's all about helping them, giving them a clue so that they can express what it is that they need to actually say. Now let's look at the next slide. Item number 11, responding to children's communication. It's the same status quo of minimal, good, and excellent, 3, 5, and 7. So remember, to get the maximum credit during the observation, you must be near the children to respond. And hopefully you are, because you're engaged in that conversation. Even as you move about the classroom, the child is probably moving with you, or you're moving with them. And you've got to give a satisfying response. That's in the level 3, the minimal. That does not include ignoring them. If you ignore them, that's going to discredit you from this item altogether, and you won't receive the maximum credit that you could have, because you did use a lot of conversation. You did add new vocabulary, but there was that instance where a child was ignored. No, no ignoring. We want to address each child as they are, where they are. Level 5, at the good level, staff usually respond to a child crying or upset with a satisfying response. And this is a biggie because the crying, because you're familiar with the child's temperament, because they typically do this each morning when they arrive, is no reason for you not to address it with that young child or those young children. Again, ignoring them is not an option. And your responses must be beyond satisfying. It's got to be very positive and very attentive to the child, very specific, very intentional. This is what we mean with no negative responses. And I'm not even going to reiterate what those can be because we've heard them. And I'm sure you all have corrected your teaching staff if and when those negative responses are given. Staff show much positive interest in what children communicate to them. Staff says the word that the child is trying to communicate. Remember, it's giving them that expressive language. And then it gives you how many times that needs to be observed. And again, it's for 2 different children at the level 5. And then for level 7, this is the majority of the time, the high percentage of the time. You're showing more individualized attention and response to each child throughout the observation. So those conversations are more of a individual one-on-one and not so much as a collective. Because you can have collective conversation at meals, but it becomes individualized when you call that child by name. So you can do that even during meal times. Make them more personal and individualized by calling out specifics within that child's space of what they're eating. Janice, tell me, what color is that? What color is that noodle, that pasta, that broccoli, etc.? But no child should be ignored. Okie dokie. Unmute, Sherry.
Have to get back to my picture to unmute. We're moving on to 12, encouraging children to communicate. So here we're really looking at 3 different aspects of communication that are going to be evaluated in this item. First is how staff initiate the conversations with children. And when you think about initiating a conversation with an infant as opposed to a 2-year-old, it's going to be different. Because an infant is not speaking yet. Their main, voice of communication may be crying or pointing, or you got to know those nonverbal cues for an infant. So really looking at how you communicate with the children. The second is how staff use questions to encourage children to communicate with them. Once again, you're going to be on their level. You're going to be right beside them, next to them, close to them. You want to ask questions that are going to be meaningful to them. If you're looking at a display, maybe talking about pictures of the family, their pet, the food. You're not going to ask a 2-year-old what tomorrow is, what comes after Tuesday, or whatever. They're not going to know that necessarily. So you're going to want to make sure it's meaningful. The third is to the extent to which staff respond to children's communication. So if a child is crying while an observer is there, you're going to want it to the best of your ability to identify why that child is crying. Do they need to be moved? Or have they been in a place too long? If it's a non-mobile infant, do you need to bring materials to them? Do they need to be changed? Do they need to eat? Does a 2-year-old need a snack? They're getting hungry. They need a little 20-minute nap. What's going on? Though they don't want to see in this one, like trying to control their behavior. That does not count in this indicator. This is more of the communication that you're talking to a friend or a family member. I think we've mentioned that before. They want to see this during free play, daily routines throughout the day. So lots of turn taking, especially with the older toddlers and 2-year-old children. Let's go to the next slide. So on number 12, encouraging children to communicate. We want to look at this. We're looking at verbal and nonverbal. Once again, these interactions, we can't stress enough. It's picked up in probably 30 of the 33 items. Interactions is going to be very, very important. Verbal, nonverbal cues. So at the 3 level, this sometimes happens. Initiate conversations with children, ask appropriate questions, and then wait for the children to respond. That's something sometimes we have trouble with simply because we want to answer the question for the child. So just consciously waiting just a minute for the child to respond if they're talking. Staff responds positively with children who can't answer questions. So those non-mobile or non-vocal children, you can talk to them and ask questions. Level 5, initiating those conversations and having them with children throughout the observation. So you don't want just a whole bunch of talking that first hour and the other 2 hours you hardly ever speak at all. They want it throughout the whole conversation, personalizing questions, talking about them, themselves, their family, what's going on in the classroom, those displays that are put up there. For 3.1, you can look in your book on page 39 for most of them, unless you have the updated, that has the additional notes on it. It says for 3.1, staff sometimes initiate conversations with children. It says to observe this 3 times at the level 3 level. And you go down, it says respond to neutral or positive with children who can't answer questions. When you're looking at the 5 level, it says staff initiate engaging conversations. So they want to see this doing multiple times here. Asking questions, pay attention to children's cues, giving them a satisfying answer to that. When you look on level 7 on this level, staff frequently have turn-taking conversations with children, making appropriate questions throughout during both free play and routine. So they want to see it at the 7 level at both places during the observation. Asking questions, waiting for a response. It gives you examples. Once again, if you have that all about book, can't stress that enough. It gives you many, many, many written examples as well as pictures in the book to help you with these items in the environment rating scale. Number 13, staff use books with children. If you remember, we talked about this earlier, 1.1. It says staff do not use any books with children during the observation. So if that's not posted somewhere, or if it's not a part of their daily routine, they will not get past a 1 in this item. They have to use books with the children. Read, read, read. Make sure children are interested and engaged. We want to see pleasant, pointing out pictures, words, asking questions during this. Not only read, but talk about the story. You know, for some of the older groups, you can say, what do you think will happen next? Show interest. Talk and read with enthusiasm. If you don't ever change your mind, like when you're talking through a book and changing your tone of voice and stuff like that with enthusiasm, the children are really not going to be interested. I've been in some classrooms where the teacher may put on a hat or put on some funny glasses, and that gets the children interested to come to books and listen in the books. No violence in books, of course. We've always known that. In these levels, it could be with one child or a small group. So thinking about that, but at least one time for level 3 during the observation to read aloud and point to pictures. Book time should be pleasant and children engage, and the children can easily see the content of the book and generally comfortable. Just making sure I hadn't missed anything on that one. For level 5, if you look at level 5, it says books used with interested children informally with one or a very small group. They have to observe that one time. If they don't, you won't get credit for that. 5.2, staff make book times attractive to children and can leave if not interested. This is something that teachers really, really, really have a hard time doing. So for 5.2, if the children are not interested, they are allowed to go do something else. 5.3 on this one, staff point out and name some pictures in the book. This observed for 2 different children. Once again, you need to go in there and have the teachers to look and read these indicators and highlight these things. We're going to give you stuff to observe, but it's important that they know this has to be observed for 2 different children in order to get credit. 5.4, staff read the text in the book as well, talk about the story or the pictures. You have to observe one. At least one time there. Show much interest and enjoyment with the books. Level 7, books used several times during their observation. So for 7.1, it says you have to observe 2 different children at 2 different times. Books are used informally with children several times throughout the observation. So 7.1, that needs to be highlighted. 7.2, same thing. Observe for 2 different children at 2 different times. Staff usually encourage children to be actively involved in the books. So what does that mean? You know, for just a very, very small children, it could be one of those touch and feel books. So having them touch and feel the animals in the book. It could be helping the older child turn a page in the book or asking questions about the book. Or even an older toddler holding a book or a 2-year-old holding a book. 7.3, staff sometimes follow printed words with a finger in the book that's read. Now, this can also be an NA, but it needs to be observed once if it's not an NA. So if the children in this classroom that you're observing is all birth through 11 months old, then you don't have to do 7.3. But if they're over 11 months, 12 months and older, then they would want to see you. Staffs follow printed words with their finger in the book as they read. And they're very cautious about this. They're looking to make sure that you do these things. Let's see, for 14. Encouraging children's use of books. Once again, they got to be accessible, making sure they're appropriate and accessible. You have to bring the books to the non-mobile children. You need some fiction and some factual books. And staff and children are engaged when they're looking at these books and encourage them. A lot of this is going to be coming from the teacher in this item number 14. When you look at level 5, and I just kind of skipped altogether on level 3, but let's look at level 3, even though I don't have it on here. Level 3 says, how many books do you have to have for level 3? Somebody just look at those indicators and tell me how many books you have to have for level 3. Pull up my chat here. I see somebody putting something in. Okay, Lisa says 5. If we look closely, 5 plus, that's right. It says more than 5 books accessible. So you would need at least 6 books for 5.1. Once again, you need some fiction and some factual, at least 2 of each type. Okay. 3.3, staff show some positive and no negative interest when children use books independently. You join child in looking at the book, you comment on the book, things like that. We're moving to 5. How many books do you need in level 5?
$11 books, Sherry?
Yep. Yep. 10 or more, 11 books at least, a minimum of 11, because it says more than 10 books accessible to children throughout the observation. Once again, moving those non-mobile books to the children, non-mobile books, moving books to the non-mobile children. That's very important. The books need to be within easy reach. Staff label pictures, ask questions. Be sure not to keep children in those restrictive areas so that they can't get to the books or you can't bring the books to them. So level 7, we're looking at that. How many books do we need in level 7?
21.
Yep.
Least
At
one.
least 21, that's right. Staff point extended positive interactions when children use the book. They're looking for more lengthy interactions, not just something really short and quick. It's really the higher it goes, the more lengthy and frequent it happens. That has to be observed once. And it also 7.2 says it's got an N8 on that one, so be looking if the NA is possible. 7.3, it says rotated. So you want to make sure you have books for the current season or what the children are interested at the time, what your theme is. I don't know if the library still comes around, but you can have just certain library books out that maybe that you don't typically always have in your classroom, but you've checked them out from the library. Looking at different ones like that. Now the activities is what's next, and we are not going to go through the activities because we don't have time to go through all the activities, but we will go through them, not today. So for our next slide, get back to, I'm hitting the thing. Hold on, let me get off of that. There we go. I'm going to pull up the NCR Lab website while we're on here. All of this information that we're talking to you about today is either coming from these books that we've got, the ITERS and the ECHRS, and then the NCR Lab website. I'm going to put those on there. Planning your transition to these items here, we're going to talk about and share with your staff, things that you've learned today, things that you're going to continue to learn, to have them go back and highlight and underline some of these words, the terminology, the accessibility, when you have to observe, all that kind of stuff. Register for more training. Right now, our in-depth trainings both are full, but we will do those again April, May, and June. We will have the introduction one and we will have the in-depth one as well. Connect with your coaches for resources and for additional support. Plan for observations. And then this last slide, it gives you what is coming up, okay? What's next for us? February 6th, face-to-face. We might do this Zoom. Maybe you could put in the chat box if you prefer face-to-face or if you want to do this one by Zoom. On February the 6th. This is where we'll talk about the ITERS-3. We will finish out activities, interactions, and program space. February 27th, ECHRS-3. We're going to do this like we did for ITERS today, but it will be for ECHRS. And then on March the 13th, we will finish up Inspiring Peak Performance. That's the one that we started out with this year. And then March 27th, we'll do by Zoom, ECHRS-3, those last 3 subscales there, activities, interactions, and program structure. As we're going through this and as you're thinking about how you're going to prepare your staff. If you have questions, I will keep a collection of those questions, and then we will answer them each time we have a meeting, whether it's be training or we talk about it one-on-one with each other, things like that. I also wanted to offer Thursday meetings from 4 to 5 just to ask questions regarding the rating scale. You know, it gets pretty in depth in this one. We'll do this for a couple of Thursdays. If we don't have anybody come, I won't continue. But if we will, then I'll continue it on as long as we need it. But it will start on February 27th.
Somebody's got a question about what time is the meeting for February 27th.
Oh, sorry. It will be the morning times, 9:30 to 11:30. Is that the only one, or we got more? I didn't put the time, did I?
Not for that February 27th date, you
Yep.
didn't. And
Yeah,
so
it will
they're
be
not going to be
9:30.
till 12:30? You said 11:30.
I think we can get it done by
Okay.
11:30. I mean, you
Okay.
can plan for extra just in case, but
Okay.
we're hoping, the ending of we can do that.
Yeah. Because that's what they wanted to know. Is it 2 or 3 hours?
Yeah.
As well as March.
March 13th and March 27th. I would plan for a little extra just in case we have questions on that one. More questions than we have on this one so far. But we are working on the toolkits, what must be observed. I've already sent out a couple materials checklists, the ones that are doing using part of their QSS money for equipment this year. But we're going to get it all together in a something that we can send you online. That way you'll have it at your fingertips. And if you want to print a toolkit for each classroom, you can do that regarding whether it's ITERS or ECHRS. You can do that on your own as your staff need that and want to use that.
Now, what I'm seeing in the chat box, the responses received are not from the total group, but those that did respond, the majority are requesting that we do our meetings via Zoom for that
Okay.
one that you offered. I only had one person mention in person, and those that responded are saying Zoom,
Okay. Okay.
just so you know.
All righty. That's good. That's good to know. All righty. So I'm gonna try to do a poll again. And I'm gonna launch it and see if everybody can see it this time. Oh, I've tried it earlier and it didn't do it, so never mind. But after you've had the training right now, has anything changed as far as how you feel about the environment rating scale? Are you a little bit more comfortable with what they're looking for or things like that? If not, I'm going to go down here and find my get ready for the environment rating scale. I'm going to go all the way out.
Someone's more comfortable. They feel more comfortable. Now somebody's nervous. Someone's a little more comfortable.
Okay. Gotcha. Well, and that's to be expected, honestly. It really, really is.
More comfortable, but still a little nervous. Yeah, I get it. I get it. Me too.
If you can see my screen, just give me a thumbs up in your things. Okay, because this is the environment rating scale. It's a NCR Lab website. And when you come up to it, it gives you a lot of stuff on here. And we're not even going to scroll down here to any of this revised edition. They should be taking this off soon. I'm surprised they don't even have it off now. Yeah, it does still look like it's revised. We are only going to click up here. Get ready for the threes. That's what you're going to click on. And when you click on it, a lot of the stuff that's going to be in your toolkit is right here as well. So it talks about what's new, what you can do to prepare, frequently asked questions, resources, videos, thinking more about your assessment report. What's new? It gives you what's new in the ITERS-3, ITERS-3, and then even the Family Childcare Home 3, but we don't have no Family Childcare Homes today. It gives you frequently asked questions. And it also, I think everybody knows that they can have a free outreach assessment. They are still doing those. It does not count against you. It does not count for you. You can score really, really, really well, or you can just bomb it. But this is a way that they can come out from NCR Lab, do an outreach assessment, and they will share your scores with you. They will share, what you need to work on. And then that's something Chunda and I can work with you on goals to put on your quality improvement plan for us. If you keep scrolling down, this is where it hits the resources. So if you click under the resources for additional notes, that's where you're going to get additional notes. These thinking more about spaces and furnishings, I'm going to let you look at one of these if it'll come up for me. Okay, so this is 8 pages long for the ITERS. Let's go to an ITERS since we're looking at ITERS. And they have these for each category. So space and furnishings is here. But it really gives you some questions to ask as far as your teacher goes to help them to make sure that they're doing what they need to do in the classroom. Okay. Is there natural light? One thing I didn't mention here, and when we were doing our observations, there's a classroom that had blinds in the classroom, and the blinds were never opened. So there was never any natural light shown. So they need to make sure those curtains are open or the blinds are open in order to get that item number. So I'm glad I seen that one. I thought about it. But these are really, really, really good resources. They have them on personal care routines, language and interactions, all about the activities, more about the interaction. And we talked a lot about this today. But this really gives them more things. Are you encouraging children to practice gross motor skills outside? What are you doing to adapt materials in your classroom? Peer interactions. It goes through every single item in here. Okay. You can check. Most of my centers have done these introduction classes. But you can do them over if you need a refresher course, or if you get in here and you start doing something and you have questions. That's what China and I are for, just to hear you out and help you get ready for these and make sure you understand what they're looking for. It says this short video breaks down why the assessment reports may be longer and the scores may be lower than previous. So that would be something you might want to watch. I have not seen this one. But does everybody know how to get to this website? That's the main thing. I want to make sure you know how to get to it and you're clicking here. You're not looking at any of this other stuff down here because it's null and void. I don't even want you to click this up here, really, not right now until they get everything updated for your training. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing for a moment. We will send out the powerful interactions that Chunda mentioned earlier. There's 2 handouts, and I'll send those out so she will have to make a copy to go out for you. So I'm going to put in the chat your post test and your evaluation. I want you to go ahead and do that before you leave. If you would, if you have not done that yet, while we've been on here, you can just click on the link to the post test and the evaluation. That way we can have that and we can go ahead and this is going to be a separate certificate. The ITERS and the ECHRS will be separate certificates than the Inspire and Peak Performance that we do with you guys. So it will be sent out separately.
Yeah, once we complete that peak performance series, remember, then you guys will get your certificate for those that have been with us in the past. We complete a series and then we send one certificate showing the hours earned.
Does anybody have any questions right now or thoughts or anything that they want to share? You can unmute, you can put in the chat box. I know it's a lot of stuff.
Sherry, I just want to tell you and Chunga thank you so much because honestly, like I explained to you guys before, this actually helped out a lot for you ladies to take out the time of your day to, of course, break some of this stuff down for us so we can, of course, break a lot of it down with our staff and get them in those trainings you guys offer. Thank you.
Well, you are most welcome, Regine. We appreciate you. Chunda's giving you all the hearts.
Hey, Miss Sherry, it's not about this Zoom, but I have a question.
Okay.
I just had a couple of my teachers come up here and said that they have not received the link for the Zoom tonight. Will they be getting it later or?
She sent out that.
Because they got, it was kind of like mine. They got the post-test, pre-test and stuff, but the link didn't go through.
Okay. Becky,
She sent her letter out.
Yeah,
Vicky
I know.
sent-
Yeah, she did. She
Okay.
did. And she sent everything out. But what I need you to do is if when we get done with this, would you send me either an email or a text for the ones that did not get their Zoom link?
I sure will.
Okay. Because we want to make sure we have the right email. I don't know what happened this morning when I got here. So many emails were bouncing back and said that they did not go through. Multiple, like 10 people. So I didn't know who was going to be on the call today or who wasn't. I know Crystal I talked to, and I know Becky I talked to, and y'all got through. So,
Hey,
but yes, they should have everything they need for tonight. If they don't, then you need to reach out to me or Vicky one and make sure we have their correct emails.
I sure will. Thank you.
You're welcome. If y'all are finished that post and that evaluation, y'all are free to go. We appreciate it. You're welcome.
I hit submit before I could put my name on the evaluation form. Do I need to do it again, Shonda?
Yeah, because what if somebody else didn't put their name on it too? See if
Okay.
you can. Because I can't get into that system to do anything other than to see who else did not put their
Who
name.
was that, Sonia?
Yeah.
Okay, no
Okay.
worries.
It may not let you redo it,
Ah.
Sonia. I'll make sure you get your name in there for your
Okay.
evaluation, honey. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Have a great one, ladies. Thank you.
You're welcome.